Before we begin, a quick note to you, the listener. What you are about to hear is not a rant about phones, and it is not a sermon about self-control. It is an investigation into a design choice that quietly became a social contract. Notifications began as a technical fix, a way to spare batteries and streamline networks. But over time, they evolved into a system that can interrupt a human mind on behalf of anyone who can pay, persuade, or program their way into your lock screen. The story we are about to follow is not just about beeps and banners. It is about agency. It is about the shift from intention to reaction. From I decide when to check to something else decides when I should care. As you listen, resist the temptation to treat this as nostalgia for quieter days. The point is not to romanticize the past. The point is to notice what changed inside us when silence stopped being the default. Settle in. Let the history breathe. And listen, not only for what happened, but for what it trained us to become. For most of human history, attention belonged to the body that carried it. If you were reading, you were reading. If you were walking, you were walking. The world could not slip into your mind without first passing through space, sound, or touch. A message needed a messenger. News needed ink and paper. A reminder needed a voice in the room. Even when life was busy, even when it was loud, the noise arrived through channels you could see coming. There was distance. There was friction. There was a kind of natural insulation between the self and everything that wanted something from it. That insulation was not always comfortable. It included missed calls, late letters, long waits, and the slow, aching uncertainty of not knowing. But it also included something we have trouble naming now because it is so rare in modern life. Uninterrupted continuity. The mind could stay inside one lane long enough to build momentum. Boredom was not a defect. It was a threshold. It was the blank hallway your thoughts walked through before they entered the next room. In those small gaps, the brain did maintenance. It replayed conversations. It solved problems quietly. It metabolized emotion. You could be alone in public without being lonely because your attention was not constantly being leased out to an invisible crowd. Then, slowly, the architecture began to change. Not all at once. Not with a single invention that declared itself the future. It changed the way weather changes by shifting pressure systems, by accumulating small disturbances until the climate feels different. The first breach did not look like a phone. It looked like a belt clip. In the late 20th century, to wear a pager was to carry a signal of importance. It meant you were the kind of person the world could not wait for. Doctors in hospital corridors, emergency responders, people responsible for keeping machines and systems alive. And in a darker parallel economy, people whose business also ran on urgency. The pager was blunt technology, almost primitive by modern standards. It could not deliver a paragraph. It could not carry a photograph. It could not seduce you with infinite content. It could only do one thing, and it did it well. It could insist. A vibration against the body. A small screen with a number. Sometimes a code that meant call immediately. Sometimes a simple command that there is something waiting. Go find it. That is what made the pager psychologically potent. It did not complete the loop. It began it. It planted an unfinished task inside your nervous system. It forced you into motion, into a hunt. And because it offered so little context, it trained the brain to treat every alert as potentially critical. You did not know if the number on the screen meant a life was at risk, a job was on the line, or a trivial update that could have waited. The uncertainty was part of the design, even if it was not intended as psychology. It created a new contract with technology. Availability, not when convenient, not when you chose to check, but when summoned. Still, the pager era had friction. It demanded you find a phone. It demanded quarters, or a landline, or an office desk. It demanded a physical detour that imposed a cost. The interruption was real, but it was not yet frictionless. Your attention could be pierced, but not effortlessly harvested. The pager was a needle. It was not yet a pipeline. The pipeline arrived when email stopped being something you went to get and became something that could come to get you. The most important change in the history of notifications is not a sound or a vibration pattern. It is a network pattern. It is the shift from pulling information on your schedule to being pushed information on someone else's schedule. This shift did not begin with social media, and it did not begin with the smartphone. It began in the professional world, where the promise of efficiency made the intrusion feel righteous. BlackBerry entered modern culture as a tool of seriousness. It was a small slab with a physical keyboard, a device that looked like work. It did not have the softness of entertainment. It had edges. It had discipline. It introduced a kind of portability that felt like liberation. You could leave your desk and still remain connected. You could answer the urgent thing from a taxi, from an elevator, from the back seat of a car moving through a city at night. In the language of the time, this was empowerment. It meant you were no longer chained to the office. It meant you could be flexible. But the promise carried a hidden reversal. If you could leave the office and remain connected, then the office could follow you. The boundary moved from a physical place to a psychological state. And once it became psychological, it became much easier to violate. A wall is obvious. A door can be closed. A boundary that exists only as a choice inside your head is a boundary you can be persuaded to reopen. The BlackBerry did something else, something even more consequential. It gave interruption a status symbol. The device itself became a badge of relevance. Quiet became suspicious. Silence implied you were out of the loop. A blinking indicator light on a desk began to mean you mattered. An incoming message was no longer only information. It was validation. It was proof of demand. People joked about the addiction almost immediately, and the jokes were telling because they were both alarm and confession. When a culture coins a nickname like CrackBerry, it is admitting that the device is not merely useful, it is shaping behavior. The true genius of that era was not the keyboard or the server infrastructure. It was the way the device created a low-level, constant readiness. People began to split their attention without realizing it. They were physically present in meetings, at dinner tables, in conversations, but part of their mind was parked at the edge of possibility, listening for the next signal. The interruption did not even need to arrive. The potential of interruption was enough to degrade presence. This was the early form of what would later become normal life. Continuous partial attention, the feeling that you are never fully in one place because you are always on standby for another. And still, even then, the system had a ceiling. The early push world was limited by who had access to you. It was mostly your workplace. It was mostly the small circle of people with your email and your number. It was not yet every game, every platform, every brand, every stranger, every algorithm. The interruption was still tethered to human intent. A person sent the message. A person had a reason, even if the reason was trivial. The mind could still tell itself a story that made the intrusion feel legitimate. The next phase required a device that could consolidate everything and a network architecture that could make interruption cheap, scalable, and universal. That device arrived in 2007, and at first it arrived with an absence that is hard to remember now. It was quiet. The original iPhone did not launch as a machine of constant buzzing. In its earliest form, it was a controlled environment, a fortress with a carefully managed behavior. It did not allow third-party apps the way we understand them today, and it did not allow those apps to run freely in the background. That constraint is often remembered as limitation, as Apple being strict, as a company unwilling to open the gates. But in retrospect, that early constraint was also a kind of accidental protection. The phone could sleep. When it went dark, it was truly dark. If you wanted information, you had to ask for it. You had to unlock, navigate, and check. The digital world stayed inside the glass until you invited it out. Then reality asserted itself. Developers wanted richer software. Users wanted services that could update in real time. Messaging systems wanted to behave like living conversations instead of delayed correspondence. The appetite for immediacy grew faster than the hardware could support. And underneath the desire for convenience, there was a technical problem that engineers had to solve, a problem that would later be framed as the clean logic of battery life. If every application kept its own network connection alive, constantly checking servers for updates, the phone's battery would collapse. Radios are expensive. Constant chatter drains power and creates heat. The device could not survive a world where dozens of apps behaved like anxious employees refreshing their inbox every few seconds. So the engineers built a more elegant model. They moved the waiting away from the phone. They centralized it. This is the moment that matters, and it is easy to miss because it sounds like plumbing. Apple created a push notification service that allowed one persistent connection between the phone and Apple's servers. Instead of 50 apps pinging 50 servers, those apps could tell Apple when something happened. And Apple could deliver a tiny packet of information down a single tunnel to the device. It was efficient. It was clean. It saved battery. It also changed the moral geometry of attention, because it meant that interruption became a platform feature. When a system like that exists, it does not just help your email arrive faster. It creates a universal doorway. It means any developer who can persuade you to install their app and accept their permissions can now reach into your pocket. It means the device becomes less like a tool you consult and more like a surface other people can tap onto, get your reaction. It means that the question shifts from what do you want to do with your phone to what do other systems want you to do next. In 2009, when push notifications became mainstream in the modern smartphone ecosystem, it was presented as a technical improvement. The framing was practical. It was about conserving resources. It was about letting apps be responsive without destroying battery life. But culturally, it was a redefinition of what it meant to carry a connected device. The phone was no longer simply a portal you open. It became a portal that could open itself. That shift changes behavior at a deep level because it rearranges agency. In the pull era, you decide when to check. In the push era, something else decides when to prompt you. And because the prompt arrives with uncertainty, it carries psychological force. A vibration could mean love, disaster, boredom, opportunity, or nothing at all. The brain hates uncertainty more than it hates bad news. Uncertainty creates a loop that demands closure. You do not unlock the phone because you consciously choose to. You unlock it because your nervous system has been handed a question mark and it wants an answer. At first, the pings felt novel. They felt like connection. Social platforms learn quickly that the notification is not merely an alert. It is a behavioral trigger. The message does not need to be important. It only needs to be compelling enough to make you check. It can be small. Someone liked something. Someone commented. Someone followed. Someone posted. Someone is live. The brilliance and the danger is that the notification does not deliver satisfaction. It delivers anticipation. It offers the scent of a reward, not the reward itself. This is where the story moves from infrastructure to economy, because once attention can be summoned, it can be monetized. The smartphone era did not only create new products, it created a new measurement of value. In the old software world, you sold a tool. In the app economy, prices raced toward free, and free demanded another form of payment. The payment was time. The payment was focus. The payment was the steady drip of your presence being captured, counted, and converted into advertising revenue or growth metrics. Silicon Valley began to speak in a new language. Retention, engagement, stickiness, daily active users, session length. These terms sound clinical, almost neutral, until you realize what they measure. They measure how much of a human life can be pulled into a product. They measure how often a person can be made to return. And the cheapest way to make someone return is to interrupt them. Notifications became the lever. If your product is free, you cannot rely on the user remembering you when they have a spare moment. You must reach out and create the spare moment by cutting into whatever they are doing. And because there are many products competing for the same slices of attention, the competition turns into escalation. The first app to master the lever gets an advantage. The others copy. Then they refine. Then they optimize. Then they test. It is difficult to convey how quickly interruption became scientific. It was not only about sending more notifications, it was about sending the right notification at the right time in the right format with the right emotional hook. Small design decisions became behavioral weapons. The placement of a badge, the phrasing of a prompt, the timing of a reminder, the choice of sound, even the color. The red badge is one of the most quietly influential inventions of the modern era. A small dot on an icon, a tiny number in white, a circle of red that seems harmless until you understand what it does to a brain. Red is not arbitrary. It is the color of blood, fire, warning, urgency. It is a signal the primate nervous system prioritizes without permission. A red badge creates an open loop. It announces unfinished business. And because the badge sits on your home screen like a stain, it turns the phone into a surface of cognitive debt. People begin opening apps not because they want to, but because they want to clear the badge, to remove the visual irritation, to restore a sense of order. The act looks like productivity. It feels like tidying, but it is obedient. Around the same time, other mechanics emerged that fused the phone to the reward systems of the brain. The gesture of refreshing a feed seems innocent. You pull down, new content appears. But the psychological structure mirrors the variable reward pattern that makes gambling addictive. The uncertainty is the hook. Sometimes there is something new and exciting. Sometimes there is nothing. The unpredictability trains repetition. It turns checking into a compulsion rather than a choice. The phone becomes a slot machine that fits in your hand, and the notification becomes the casino bell that tells you the machine is ready again. This is how the economy of interruption forms. Once a company understands that the user can be brought back by a ping, the ping becomes part of the product design. Once one company learns that a certain kind of message increases open rates, other companies adopt the same pattern. Once the pattern spreads, the baseline of noise rises and users become desensitized. When users become desensitized, companies escalate again. This is not because executives gather in a room and decide to harm society. It is because the logic of competition rewards whoever captures more attention. In an environment like that, restraint becomes disadvantage. Ethics becomes a tax. The incentives push toward the bottom of the brain, toward the reflexes, toward the parts of us that can be triggered fast. You can see the shift in the language of notifications over time. Early alerts were informational. A message arrived, a meeting changed, a reminder is due. But as the attention economy matured, notifications began to speak emotionally. We miss you. Your friends are waiting, come back. Do not break the streak. You have been chosen, you have been noticed. The content became less about utility and more about creating a niche. The notification stops being a courtesy and becomes a small act of persuasion. To understand why this works so well, you have to stop thinking about the phone as technology and start thinking about it as a stimulus machine attached to an animal. The most important effects of notifications happen below conscious thought. A buzz is not interpreted by the rational mind first. It is interpreted by older circuitry. The body reacts before the story catches up. When a phone buzzes or chimes, the nervous system produces a small stress response. It is not dramatic, but it is real. A sudden sound or vibration is, for a fraction of a second, a potential threat. In evolutionary terms, unexpected signals meant predators, danger, urgent change. The body responds with a microspike of arousal. Heart rate shifts, muscles tighten, cortisol rises slightly. The mind becomes alert. You can call it connectivity, but the body feels it as vigilant. Then another system takes over, and this one is often misunderstood. Dopamine is commonly described as a pleasure chemical, but it is more accurately a seeking chemical. It drives pursuit. It energizes the hunt. The phone does not need to make you happy to keep you checking. It only needs to keep you wanting. That is why people can scroll for an hour and feel worse afterward and still struggle to stop. The system being fed is not joy, it is compulsion. It is the restless, forward-leaning drive to find out what is next. Notifications exploit this because they arrive as incomplete information. They do not usually tell you everything. They show you enough to spark curiosity, enough to trigger social concern, enough to suggest urgency, but not enough to satisfy. You have to open, you have to look. You have to enter the environment where the real monetization occurs. The notification is the hook, the portal, the tug on the fishing line. It is designed to pull you into the app, and once you are there, other systems keep you there. There is a biological cost to this constant tugging, and it is not limited to mood. It reaches into cognition itself. Humans like to believe they can multitask. The modern workplace even celebrates it, as if rapid responsiveness is a sign of competence. But the brain cannot truly do two complex tasks at once. It can only switch, and switching has a price. When you are focused on something, your brain builds a context. It loads a set of assumptions, goals, and mental models. A notification forces a context switch. Even if you dismiss it quickly, part of your mind stays stuck on it. This is what researchers call attentional residue. The prior task leaves a trace. The new task does not fully replace it. The brain runs both in partial mode, and that partial mode is less efficient, less creative, less accurate. Over time, a day filled with interruptions becomes a day of shallow effort. You feel busy, but the work never gains depth. You expend energy, but the output feels thin. And because the interruptions keep arriving, you rarely return to full focus long enough to experience flow. The tragedy is that many people adapt by blaming themselves. They think they lack discipline. They think they are lazy. They think they have a personal flaw. But the environment has been engineered to make deep focus difficult. If your day is punctured every few minutes by pings, you are not failing at concentration. You are living inside a system designed to fragment it. Over years, this fragmentation can become a habit of mind. The brain is plastic. It rewires itself based on use. If you repeatedly train it to switch, it becomes better at switching and worse at sustaining. You become quicker at scanning and slower at thinking. You become more responsive and less reflective. You begin to prefer stimulation because stimulation feels normal, and quiet begins to feel like withdrawal. This is where the story turns cultural, because once a technology reshapes individual cognition at scale, it reshapes society. The notification does not only interrupt tasks, it interrupts relationships. By the mid-2010s, a new presence entered everyday conversations. Not a person, but a possibility. The phone on the table is not neutral, even when it is silent. It represents elsewhere. It represents other people, other messages, other attention that might be more rewarding than the one in front of you. That knowledge changes how you listen. It changes how deeply you speak. It introduces a subtle performance anxiety into intimacy, because any moment might be cut short by a buzz. Conversations become less like journeys and more like a series of clipped exchanges. People start holding back unconsciously because they sense the connection is fragile. This is the emotional core of the modern notification era, the normalization of partial presence. You are here, but not entirely. You are always reachable, which means you are always leavable. You can be interrupted not only by your boss or your partner, but by a feed, a group chat, a distant acquaintance, an algorithmic reminder to keep a streak alive. It is not only rude, it is destabilizing. It teaches the brain that no moment deserves full commitment because something else might arrive that demands a reaction. In younger generations, this environment introduced a new kind of anxiety. Before the always-on era, you could miss a party and not know. You could be left out and not be forced to watch it in real time. Social life had opacity. The notification era removes opacity. It turns social comparison into a constant stream. You are alerted when people post their highlights, when they go live, when they gather without you. The phone becomes a machine that informs you repeatedly that other lives are happening elsewhere. Fear of missing out is not only a phrase, it is a chronic condition. produced by a system that keeps pointing toward what you are not doing. In the workplace, the logic spread even further. Communication platforms transformed the office into a real-time chat room. The promise was efficiency and collaboration. The result often was an expectation of immediate response. Work became less about what you made and more about how quickly you replied. A red dot became a managerial tool. The open office filled with people wearing headphones not to enjoy music, but to defend themselves from constant intrusion. And even that defense was incomplete because the intrusion lived on the screen. As the boundaries dissolved, life began to feel like a continuous shift. The day did not end. It merely changed locations. People left offices and carried the same stream into kitchens, bedrooms, weekends, vacations. The phone did not care that it was evening. The server did not care that it was a family dinner. A notification can arrive anywhere, and that fact alone changes the nervous system. You remain in readiness. You remain available. You remain partially owned. One of the most disturbing proofs of this conditioning is what people will risk to obey the ping. Driving requires attention to survive. It is one of the most demanding cognitive tasks in modern life. And yet people routinely take their eyes off the road to check a notification. Not because the message is important, but because the loop is open. The brain wants closure. The impulse to resolve uncertainty becomes so strong that it overrides self-preservation. The car drifts. The world narrows. The phone becomes the center of gravity, and the laws of physics do not negotiate with habit. In homes, a quieter shift occurred, one that may have consequences for decades. Children learn attention through attention. They learn emotional regulation through face-to-face interaction. They learn safety through being seen. When parents are physically present, but mentally elsewhere, children receive a confusing signal. The body is here, the mind is not. The phone becomes a rival for eye contact. It becomes the object that gets touched most, the object that gets checked most, the object that seems to matter more than the room itself. A generation grows up watching adults flinch at buzzing rectangles, watching conversations pause mid-sentence, watching meals interrupted, watching boredom eliminated. They inherit not only devices, but a model of what it means to be a person in the world, alert, reactive, always reachable. By the late 2010s, the cultural mood began to change. Weariness entered the conversation. People started to suspect what had once been sold as convenience was also a kind of control. Former insiders began to speak publicly about design practices, about how products were optimized to capture attention rather than serve users. The metaphor shifted. Technology was compared to tobacco, to gambling, to other industries that had learned to monetize compulsive behavior. Documentaries, testimonies, and public debates made a once private experience feel like a collective problem. The response from the companies was telling, not because it solved the problem, but because it revealed an admission. The platforms that had engineered interruption began offering tools to limit it. Screen time dashboards, digital well-being, focus modes, notification summaries. This was a strange moment in modern capitalism. The supplier of the stimulus offering the consumer a self-control kit. It resembled an arms dealer selling both weapons and armor, and it exposed the paradox at the heart of the notification era. The same device that causes the fragmentation is now marketed as the solution. These tools help some people. They provide visibility. They allow boundaries. They make it possible to mute and filter. But they also shift responsibility onto the individual. You have to configure your defenses. You have to decide who deserves access to you. You have to build the wall that the system profitably tore down. And even with the wall built, the anxiety often remains because the habit is not only in settings, it is in the body. Turning off notifications can feel like silence in a room that used to have constant noise. The quiet becomes noticeable. It can feel like something is missing, and the brain, trained by years of stimuli, interprets missing stimulation as a problem to solve. Then the world experienced an event that accelerated dependence again. The pandemic forced people indoors and moved social life onto screens. In that period, the phone became lifeline. Notifications carried health updates, work instructions, family news, and the fragile threads of contact that kept isolation from becoming unbearable. The distinction between harmful distraction and necessary connection blurred. People abandoned limits because limits felt impossible in a moment when the world itself was uncertain. Many emerged from that era with a changed relationship to the device, less enchanted and more exhausted. The phone had proven itself essential, and in doing so, it had also exposed how deeply it had colonized attention. Now the story reaches its next turning point, and it is not reassuring. The future of notifications is not simply more of the same. It is more intimate. The smartphone demands you look down. That physical action creates a tiny boundary. It requires a gesture. It requires a choice, even if the choice is reflexive. Emerging technologies aim to remove that boundary. Wearable devices already do part of this. A vibration on the wrist is closer to the nervous system than a phone in a pocket. It is harder to ignore. The body interprets it as touch, as contact, as urgency. The next step is spatial computing, where alerts float in your field of view, where the interface is no longer contained in a rectangle you can put away. When notifications can appear in the room itself, overlaying your environment, the interruption becomes harder to escape because it occupies the same perceptual space as your life. The challenge is no longer resisting the urge to check a phone. It is resisting reality itself being annotated by external demands. And beyond that, there is the more radical horizon, where the boundary between system and self becomes even thinner. Brain-computer interfaces, if they mature, will not merely deliver a ping through sound or vibration. They will deliver it as sensation, as thought, as direct neural event. That idea is often presented as science fiction, but the direction is clear. Technology trends toward less friction, and notifications are friction that companies would like to remove. The question is, what happens to agency when interruption does not require a device at all? When the stream of consciousness can be tapped as easily as a screen? At this point, it becomes tempting to turn the story into either a celebration or a moral panic. But the more honest conclusion is more complicated. Notifications are not purely evil. They have saved lives. They have delivered urgent information. They have connected families. They have enabled work, community, and care. The problem is not that messages arrive. The problem is that the default design of modern systems treats your attention as an open resource, available to any actor who can justify a ping. The problem is that an infrastructure built to save battery life created an economy built to spend human focus. we call distraction is often a rational response to an environment that is intentionally distracting. What we call a lack of willpower is often the predictable result of a variable reward system tuned to exploit uncertainty. What we call modern life is, in many ways, a constant negotiation between the desire to live in the present and the systems designed to pull us out of it. There is a sentence hidden inside all of this, a sentence that functions like a thesis for the era. In the pull world, you checked your email. In the push world, your email checked you. That is not just acute inversion. It is a transfer of initiative. It is the moment humanity allowed third parties to interrupt the mind's stream at will, and then built an economy around that permission. The only path forward that does not end in total resignation is not a fantasy of returning to an older world. That world is gone. The path forward is learning to treat attention as something sacred, not in a sentimental way, but in a practical way. Attention is the medium through which life is experienced. If your attention is constantly elsewhere, your life is constantly elsewhere. Reclaiming attention does not mean rejecting technology. It means restoring choice. It means rebuilding friction deliberately. The way a city builds speed bumps in neighborhoods where children play. It means deciding that not every possible message deserves a reaction, and that immediacy is not the same thing as important. This is why the smallest acts can be radical. Turning off non-essential notifications, moving the phone out of sight during meals, creating blocks of time where the world must wait, teaching children that boredom is not an emergency, treating the mind as a place that deserves privacy. These are not productivity hacks. They are boundary rituals. They are ways of saying that the self is not a public square where any platform can shout. Because the deepest truth of the notification era is not technical, it is human. The devices did not steal attention by force. We traded it, often willingly, for convenience, for social belonging, for the feeling of being needed, for the relief of never missing anything. The trade made sense in small doses. It became destructive in bulk. And now we are left with a question that is both simple and difficult. Who gets access to your consciousness, and on what term? If you want to remember the shape of the answer, do it the easiest way. Put the phone face down for a moment. Let the room exist without annotation. Let your mind feel the itch, the small phantom tug to check. And notice that the tug is not destiny, it is conditioning. Conditioning can be rewritten. Not instantly, not effortlessly, but steadily. The way a muscle is rebuilt. The brain adapts to what you feed it. If you feed it constant interruption, it becomes an interruption machine. If you feed it sustained presence, it remembers how to stay. And if you are still listening right now, that means you have already done something increasingly rare. You stayed with one thread. You followed a continuous line long enough for it to mean something. That is the point. That is the skill the notification economy quietly tries to dissolve, because a person who can hold attention is harder to manipulate. If this story helped you see your own devices differently, share it with someone who is exhausted by the noise but cannot name why. And if you want more documentaries like this, follow the channel, because the next battles over attention will not be fought only on screens. They will be fought in the design of everyday life. in the spaces where the mind decides what it belongs to. And now, at the end, here is the part that matters most. Notifications did not simply add noise to our lives. They taught our brains a new rhythm, a rhythm built around interruption. They turned attention into a commodity that can be bought and sold, and they made it feel normal to be reachable at all times, even when reachability comes at the cost of presence. But the fact that we were trained does not mean we are trapped. Conditioning can be undone. Boundaries can be rebuilt. Not perfectly, not forever, but deliberately. The most radical act is not deleting your apps or moving to the woods. It is choosing, with intention, when the world gets access to you. If this documentary gave you language for something you have felt but never fully named, share it with someone who is living inside the same noise. And if you want more high production, long-form stories like this, stories that trace the hidden history behind the technologies shaping your everyday life, subscribe and stay here. Because the next war over attention will not announce itself with a sound. It will arrive quietly as a default setting.